Before the first light touched the quiet street, the last page of the diary was already gone. No torn edge. No dust. No sound of a door opening in the night. Only an empty space where truth had once been written. The small coastal town still slept under a pale blue sky, the kind of town where nothing was supposed to disappear and no secret stayed hidden for long. Old trucks rested beside wooden houses. A single diner sign hummed softly near the highway. Waves moved in a slow rhythm beyond the dark line of trees. Everything felt ordinary, except for the room at the end of Maple Street. Inside that room a desk lamp glowed over an open notebook. Pages filled with careful handwriting stopped suddenly at the final line. And the final line was not the end of a story. It was the beginning of a silence. The one who found the diary was a quiet figure named Alohan Hart. Not young enough to believe every mystery had magic. Not old enough to stop searching for meaning. Alohan lived alone in a narrow house with tall windows that faced the sea wind. Books lined the walls in uneven rows. Photographs stayed hidden inside drawers instead of frames. People in town described Alohan as calm, helpful, forgettable. But calm people often carried the deepest storms where no one could see. Alohan worked at the Public Records Office, a place filled with birth dates, property lines, and stories reduced to paper and ink. Most days passed in soft silence. Most questions had simple answers. Until the morning the diary arrived. It had been left in a return box outside the building sometime during the night. No name attached. No envelope. Just a worn leather cover and pages filled with steady handwriting. The handwriting belonged to someone careful. Someone patient. Someone who believed words mattered. Alohan should have placed it in Lost and Found. That would have been the correct rule. The safe rule. The rule that kept life quiet. But something about the diary felt different the moment it touched Alohan's hands. The cover was warm despite the cold air outside. Not warm like sunlight. Warm like it had been held tightly for a long time. That feeling stayed in Alohan's chest long after the building lights turned on. So instead of locking the diary away, Alohan opened it. The first pages spoke of simple things. Morning walks near the water. Coffee growing cold on a kitchen table. The sound of a train far away at night. Normal memories. Gentle memories. The kind people write when they believe tomorrow will arrive just the same. But as the pages turned, the tone began to shift. Small worries appeared between peaceful lines. Strangers watching from parked cars. Footsteps that stopped when the writer turned around. Phone calls with no voice on the other end. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that could be proven. Only the quiet feeling of being seen when no one should be there. Alohan kept reading. Hours passed without notice. Sunlight climbed across the office floor. Dust moved through the air like slow snow. And the diary kept growing heavier in meaning. Some entries mentioned places around town. The old pier that creaked in winter wind. The grocery store that never changed its music. The narrow road leading toward abandoned farmland. Each detail felt precise. Almost careful enough to guide someone. As if the writer feared forgetting. Or feared not being believed. The words began to carry tension that could not be explained with simple worry. One entry described a car that appeared every Thursday night. Engine running. Lights off. Never parking in the same place twice. Another entry described a figure standing near the water before sunrise. Too far to recognize. Too still to feel natural. The writer never used dramatic language. Never claimed danger. Never asked for help. That quiet restraint made the fear feel more real. Alohan felt something unfamiliar growing inside with every page. Not curiosity alone. Something closer to recognition. Because years earlier another story in this same town had also begun with small details that no one took seriously. A missing person report that slowly faded from conversation. Search posters that disappeared one by one. A family that moved away without goodbye. Time had buried that memory for everyone else. But not for Alohan. And now this diary felt like an echo returning through years of silence. The final written entry stopped in the middle of a sentence. Not finished. Not crossed out. Simply stopped. As if the writer had been pulled away before the truth could be completed. Aloan turned the page expecting more. There was nothing. No final goodbye. No explanation. No signature. Just blank paper. But the strangest part was not the empty page. It was the mark left behind. A faint impression pressed into the paper beneath. Words that had once existed. Words removed carefully and completely. Someone had taken the last entry without disturbing anything else. Whoever removed it knew exactly what they were doing. That was the moment the quiet rhythm of Aloan's life began to break. Because lost objects usually come with simple stories. This one came with silence. And silence can be louder than any confession. Aloan looked around the empty records office. Every shelf stood still. Every clock ticked with patient certainty. Nothing in the room explained the missing page. Yet the feeling in the air had changed. The world outside the windows looked the same. Cars passing slowly. Clouds drifting without purpose. A delivery truck stopping near the diner. But inside something unseen had begun to move. Aloan closed the diary gently, almost with care meant for a living thing. A simple choice waited in that quiet moment. Return the diary to a box. Forget the strange feeling. Step back into a peaceful, invisible life. Or follow the silence toward whatever truth someone had tried to erase. Most people would choose peace. Aloan did not. Because long before this morning another disappearance had shaped every quiet day since. A disappearance the town no longer talked about. A name no one mentioned in public. A question that never found an answer. Aloan had learned how easily truth could vanish when no one kept looking. That memory stirred now like wind before a storm. The missing diary page felt connected to something older. Something buried deeper than one stranger's fear. Aloan did not know why. Only that the feeling would not leave. Outside, the diner sign flickered as morning traffic slowly began. Voices would soon fill the streets. Ordinary life would return. But the diary had already changed the shape of the day. Aloan slipped it into a canvas bag, hand steady but heart moving faster than usual. One quiet decision. Almost invisible. Yet some decisions open doors that never close again. The door had opened. And somewhere beyond the calm streets of the town, someone knew the last page was gone. Someone who believed removing words could bury the truth forever. They were wrong. Because silence does not end a story. It only waits for the right person to listen. As Aloan stepped outside into the pale morning light, the sea wind carried a chill that did not belong to the weather. It felt like a warning. Or an invitation. The empty final page rested inside the bag, light as paper but heavy as memory. Each step toward the street felt like moving deeper into something unseen. A question followed closely, refusing to fade. If the last diary entry had been taken before dawn, what truth had someone been so desperate to hide? And more quietly, who had been watching closely enough to know it was written at all? Aloan paused at the edge of the sidewalk, listening to the distant sound of waves beyond the houses. For a brief moment everything felt perfectly still. As if the town itself were holding its breath, waiting to see whether the silence would remain buried, or finally be broken. The morning moved forward like any other day in the town. Cars rolled past the diner. A school bus sighed at the corner. Someone watered flowers that would bloom whether secrets existed or not. Nothing in the open world suggested that a hidden story had begun to unfold. Yet inside Aloan something had already changed. The canvas bag felt heavier than paper should feel. Each quiet step carried a sense of being watched not by eyes alone but by memory. Aloan did not go home right away. Instead, the path turned toward the shoreline road where the ocean stayed restless even when the town felt calm. Wind brushed across tall grass. Gulls circled without sound for a moment before crying into the air. This was the place Aloan came when thoughts refused to settle. Today, the thoughts would not settle at all. The diary came out slowly, careful hands opening again to the unfinished ending. Blank paper still waited where truth should have lived. Aloan studied the faint pressure marks beneath the missing page. Lines pressed deep enough to prove the final words had carried weight. Not rushed. Not careless. Whoever wrote that last entry had wanted it remembered. Whoever removed it had wanted the opposite. A quiet tension formed between those two intentions, and Aloan stood directly in the middle. The sea moved in slow repeating waves like time breathing in and out. Years earlier, another morning near this same water had carried a different silence. Back then, Alohan had not been alone. There had been another presence walking beside the tide line. Someone who laughed softly at small things. Someone who believed leaving town one day would mean freedom instead of loss. That person had vanished before summer ended. No clear goodbye. No clear reason. Only questions that folded into official reports and then into dust. The town searched for a while. Volunteers walked the woods. Flyers hung in grocery windows. Then seasons changed. Attention faded. Life continued. But Alohan never stopped feeling the unfinished space left behind. The memory returned, now sharper than it had in years. Because the diary carried the same quiet pattern. Small worries ignored. Silence growing. Truth interrupted. Alohan closed the diary again, breathing slowly as if calm could return through effort alone. It did not. Instead, a decision formed with gentle certainty. If the missing page had been removed recently, then someone nearby still cared enough to hide it. Which meant the story was not over. That thought carried both fear and purpose. Alohan turned away from the water and began walking toward the older part of town where records stretched back farther than memory. The Public Records Office held birth certificates and land deeds. But another building held stories people tried to forget. The local newspaper archive. Dust lived there thicker than air. Boxes stacked in narrow aisles. Photographs frozen in moments no one spoke about anymore. The caretaker barely looked up as Alohan entered. Visitors were rare. Questions about the past even rarer. Alohan moved through rows of dated folders, searching not for a name but for a feeling. The year of the earlier disappearance came back slowly. One article. Then another. Then silence where coverage had simply stopped. No resolution printed. No final explanation. Just absence. That absence matched the diary too closely to ignore. Hours passed inside dim light. Outside, the sky shifted toward afternoon gold. Finally, one small detail appeared inside an overlooked column. A mention of unusual phone calls reported by more than one resident during that same year. Calls with no voice. Calls arriving late at night. Calls never traced. The article treated it like rumor. A curiosity without importance. But Alohan felt the quiet thread connecting past and present pull tighter. Because the diary had described the same thing. Not coincidence. Not imagination. Pattern. And patterns meant intention. A slow chill moved through the still air of the archive room. If someone had been watching people years ago, and someone was watching again now, then the missing page might hold the reason why. Alohan copied the article carefully, hands steady through rising unease. Each piece of information felt small alone. Together they formed the edge of something darker. Evening approached before Alohan stepped back outside. Street lights flickered awake one by one. The diner windows glowed warm against cooling air. Voices drifted from inside, carrying laughter untouched by hidden fear. For a moment Alohan envied that simple safety. Then the feeling passed. Because once a question begins, it rarely allows escape. The walk home felt different than usual. Shadows stretched longer across sidewalks. Every parked car seemed to hold possibility. Not danger proven. Just awareness sharpened. Inside, the narrow house silence waited patiently. Alohan locked the door, placed the diary on the kitchen table and stood still listening. Nothing. Only the soft ticking of a wall clock. Only wind touching glass. Yet the sense of being one step inside an unseen story remained. A kettle warmed on the stove, forgotten as thoughts circled the same question. Why remove only the final page? If the earlier entries already described fear, then the ending must reveal something more. Something specific. Something that could not be allowed to exist. Names, perhaps. Places. Truth strong enough to break whatever silence had lasted for years. Steam rose quietly before Alohan noticed and turned off the heat. Night settled deeper outside, wrapping the town in calm darkness. Most homes dimmed their lights. Most people slept without knowing anything had changed. But across the table the diary stayed open to emptiness. Alohan reached toward the faint impressions again, this time placing thin paper over the page and shading softly with pencil. Lines appeared slowly like ghosts returning. Not clear words. Not full sentences. Only fragments. A date. Part of a location near the northern road. And one unfinished phrase. They know. The pencil stopped moving. Air felt suddenly colder though windows remained closed. They know. Two simple words carrying weight far beyond ink. Know what? Know who? Know that the writer had discovered something never meant to surface. A sound interrupted the stillness. Soft. Almost polite. A knock at the door. Not loud enough to feel urgent. Not gentle enough to feel friendly. Exactly 3 quiet taps. Alohan did not move at first. The clock continued ticking. The house remained silent except for breathing that had grown shallow without permission. Another 3 taps followed. Who would visit this late without calling first? Who would knock so carefully as if already certain someone was inside? The diary lay open, revealing the ghost of hidden truth. And suddenly the distance between past disappearance and present mystery felt very small. Alohan stepped toward the door slowly, each movement measured against instinct. Hand paused above the lock. Because opening a door can change everything. And some moments divide life into before and after without warning. The knocking stopped. Silence returned heavier than before. Through the narrow glass beside the door only darkness showed. No clear figure. No sound of footsteps leaving. Just waiting. Alohan's hand remained suspended, caught between caution and need to know. Inside the kitchen the unfinished words rested beneath pencil shadow. They know. Outside someone stood in the night close enough to touch the door. And the question that had followed since morning grew sharper than fear. Was the visitor searching for help? Or making sure the truth stayed buried? The hand above the lock did not move for several long breaths. Silence pressed against the door from both sides. Inside the house the air felt thin. Outside the night held its secrets without sound. Alohan listened for footsteps fading down the path. None came. Whoever had knocked was still there. Close enough to hear the smallest movement inside. Close enough to know the door had not yet opened. Fear did not arrive suddenly. It spread slowly like cold through water. Quiet. Patient. Certain. Another soft sound reached the wood. Not a knock this time. Only the faint shift of weight as if someone leaned closer. Alohan forced a slow breath and finally turned the lock. The sound felt louder than it should. Metal against metal echoing through the narrow hallway. For a moment nothing happened. Then the door opened only a few inches. Enough to let the porch light fall across empty space. No figure. No shadow. No movement along the street. Only the wind touching the steps. Only darkness stretching toward the road. The visitor was gone. Yet the absence felt deliberate. As if the purpose had never been conversation. Only a reminder. Alohan stepped outside, carefully, eyes searching the quiet street. Every house remained still. Curtains closed. Lights dim. But near the edge of the walkway something small rested on the wooden boards. A folded piece of paper. No envelope. No name. Just a single crease holding it shut. Alohan did not need to touch it to feel the meaning. The knock had never been a mistake. Slow fingers lifted the paper. Light from the doorway revealed only 3 written words inside. Stop looking now. Nothing more. No signature. No explanation. Only command. The message carried no anger. No threat written openly. Which made it far more unsettling. Because calm warnings often hide the deepest danger. Alohan stood frozen between doorway light and night shadow. Heart beating with steady force that refused to slow. Someone knew about the diary. Someone knew Alohan had begun to search. And someone was close enough to watch the house in silence. The paper trembled slightly before Alohan folded it again. For a brief moment the simplest choice returned. Close the door. Forget everything. Return to the quiet, invisible life that had once felt safe. No more questions. No more fear. No more unfinished stories. Peace waited just one decision away. But peace built on silence had already stolen too much once before. The memory of the earlier disappearance rose again. Stronger now. Sharper. Back then Aloan had trusted time to reveal truth. Time had revealed nothing. Only emptiness. That mistake would not repeat. The door closed firmly behind determined hands. Lock turning once more. Inside the kitchen the diary still lay open to the faint pencil shadows. They know. Now the meaning deepened. They did not only know the writer's secret. They knew Aloan was searching. Which meant the hidden truth was still dangerous. Fear remained. But something else began to grow beside it. Resolve. Because warnings only matter when someone obeys them. Aloan sat at the table again studying every fragment already gathered. The article about silent phone calls years earlier. The diary entries describing watching eyes. The missing final page. The message left at the door. Separate pieces. One pattern. Someone had been watching this town for a long time. Quietly. Carefully. Without being seen. And the diary writer had discovered why. A new thought surfaced slowly. If the writer feared being taken before finishing the last entry, they might have hidden proof somewhere else. People who sense danger often leave traces behind. Small signals meant for the right person to find later. Aloan returned to the earlier diary pages searching not for emotion this time but for direction. Descriptions of ordinary places appeared again. The pier. The grocery store. The northern road. Details that once felt like memory now felt like markers. One entry mentioned hearing something beneath the old pier after midnight. Not waves. Not animals. Something mechanical hidden underwater. Another described lights in an abandoned farmhouse far beyond the northern road. Lights that never appeared during day. At the time those lines sounded like fear shaping imagination. Now they felt precise. Intentional. Clues hidden inside routine words. A quiet realization settled in. The missing final page might not be the only truth left behind. Which meant the story could still be followed. Outside the clock moved deeper into night. Most of the town slept unaware that silence was beginning to break. Aloan gathered a coat and flashlight with steady movements that surprised even trembling hands. Leaving the house after a warning should have felt impossible. Instead it felt necessary. Because waiting inside would only give fear time to grow stronger. And fear thrives in stillness. The street greeted Aloan with cold wind and empty sidewalks. Clouds covered the moon, leaving only faint silver light. Each step toward the northern road felt louder than normal. Gravel shifting. Fabric brushing. Breath visible in the air. No cars passed. No windows opened. Yet the sensation of unseen eyes followed closely. Not proven, but undeniable. The road stretched farther from town lights until darkness thickened around the edges of vision. Trees stood close together, branches moving softly above. The sound almost like whispering voices that stopped when listened to directly. Minutes felt longer than time should allow. Then at last the outline of the abandoned farmhouse appeared ahead. Broken fence. Sagging roof. Windows empty as hollow eyes. No light showed at first. Only ruin resting in silence. Aloan slowed, uncertain whether hope or dread waited closer. Because if nothing was here, the search would end in confusion. And if something was here, the danger would become real. A faint glow suddenly flickered behind one shattered window. Gone. Then back again. Not lightning. Not reflection. Light moving from inside. Every instinct urged turning back. But truth often waits beyond the point where comfort ends. Careful steps crossed the broken fence line. Wood creaking softly underweight. Closer now. Close enough to see dust drifting through dim yellow light within. No voices. No clear movement. Only presence. Aloan reached the edge of the window, heart pounding with steady force. Inside the farmhouse, one single object rested in the center of the empty room. A metal hatch set into the wooden floor. Slightly open. Faint light rising from below. The air carried a low mechanical hum almost too soft to hear. Proof. Something hidden beneath a place everyone believed abandoned. The diary writer had not imagined danger. They had found it. And now Aloan stood at the same edge of discovery. One step more would reveal whatever truth had been buried for years. One step more would make turning back impossible. Behind the trees, a distant sound cracked softly like a branch under careful weight. Not wind. Not animal. Movement. Aloan was no longer alone. The warning at the door had not been empty. Someone had followed. The hatch waited open below. Darkness waited behind. And time to choose safety was gone. The branch sound did not repeat. Yet its meaning stayed clear in the cold air behind the trees. Someone was there. Watching. Waiting. Aloan's breath slowed not from calm but from the strange focus that arrives when fear grows too large to ignore. The open hatch in the farmhouse floor released a thin line of yellow light. Soft mechanical humming rose from somewhere below like a hidden heartbeat. Two directions existed in that moment. Run back toward the safety of sleeping houses. Or step forward into the truth someone had tried to erase. Years earlier silence had stolen answers forever. That memory stood beside Aloan, now stronger than fear. Running would mean losing the truth again. So the choice was already made. One careful step carried Aloan through the broken doorway. Oldwood sighed under shifting weight. Dust moved in slow circles through the dim room. The hatch waited in the center like an eye half open. No voices came from below. No sudden movement. Only that steady mechanical hum repeating without emotion. Aloan reached the edge and looked down. A narrow metal ladder disappeared into a chamber lit by weak industrial lights. Concrete walls. Wires running along the ceiling. Shadows gathered in corners where light could not fully reach. This was not something abandoned. Not something old. This place was maintained. Hidden. Used. The realization settled heavily. Whatever secret the diary writer discovered had been real enough to protect. And dangerous enough to hide beneath an empty farmhouse far from town. Another faint sound moved outside behind the trees. Closer now. Slow steps trying not to be heard. Time had ended. Aloan gripped the cold ladder and began to descend. Each rung felt like moving deeper into a story that could no longer be escaped. The air below carried a sterile scent unfamiliar to the quiet coastal town above. At the bottom, a narrow corridor stretched in two directions. Dim lights flickered softly. The hum of unseen machines filled the silence. No guards. No voices. Only absence arranged too carefully to feel natural. Aloan moved forward, listening to every small sound. Shoes brushing concrete. Breath echoing faintly off the walls. A doorway ahead stood slightly open. Light brighter than the corridor spilled through the gap. Inside that room waited the answer to years of silence. Aloan felt it before even looking. The door opened slowly without resistance. The room beyond held metal tables covered with documents and electronic equipment. Screens dark. Chairs empty. But one wall carried something far more important. Photographs. Dozens of them pinned in careful rows. Faces of people from the town. Different ages. Different years. Some marked with dates long past. Some recent enough to feel immediate. And among those faces one image stopped the air in Aloan's lungs. The person who had disappeared years ago. The memory no one spoke about anymore. Not lost. Not forgotten. Watched. A thin line connected that photograph to notes written beside it. Observations. Movements. Times. Proof that the disappearance had never been random. Someone had been studying people in this town for years. Quietly selecting. Quietly removing. The diary writer must have found this place. Must have understood the truth. And that was why the final page had been taken. Because the last entry would have revealed everything. A sudden metallic sound echoed from the corridor outside. Too loud to hide. Too close to ignore. The follower had reached the hatch. And was coming down. Panic tried to rise, but Aloan forced it still. Fear would only steal the seconds still left. Eyes searched the room quickly. Near the far wall a small recording device blinked with a single red light. Still active. Still saving. The diary writer had not only written the truth. They had tried to preserve it. Aloan grabbed the device, hands shaking but certain. This was the proof someone wanted buried. Footsteps reached the corridor floor outside. Slow, unhurried, certain. A shadow crossed the doorway. Not rushing, not hiding. The figure stepped into the light wearing ordinary dark clothes without symbol or sign. A face calm enough to feel unreal. Someone who believed control would never break. No anger showed in their expression. Only quiet disappointment, as if Aloan had followed a path already predicted. For a long moment neither moved. The silence felt heavier than any shouted threat. Finally the stranger spoke in a voice almost gentle. "You should have listened." No weapon raised. No sudden motion. Which made the danger even clearer. Because certainty can be more frightening than violence. Aloan held the recording device tighter, feeling years of unanswered grief standing behind this single moment. Running would not save anything. Silence would not protect anyone. Truth was the only thing left. The words came quietly but without hesitation. "People will know." The stranger studied Aloan with calm eyes that revealed nothing. Then a small breath almost like regret. "No. They will forget." The certainty in that answer carried the weight of history. Because forgetting had already happened once before. But history does not always repeat. From somewhere far above a distant sound drifted faintly through the ceiling. Sirens. Soft at first. Then growing. Not imagined. Not mistaken. Someone else had followed the trail. Or the recording device had already sent its signal. For the first time uncertainty touched the stranger's still expression. Only a flicker. But real. Truth had begun to move beyond control. The sirens grew louder, filling the hidden chamber with a sound that did not belong to secrecy. The long silence surrounding the town was finally breaking. The stranger's calm faded into something unreadable. Not fear. Something colder. Calculation ending. Without another word, the figure turned toward a dark passage at the back of the room, disappearing into shadow before Aloan could move. Gone into tunnels unknown. Into plans prepared long before tonight. Escape still possible. But not invisible anymore. Because the truth was no longer buried in a missing diary page. It was here. Recorded. Carried. About to reach the surface. Aloan's strength nearly failed as the weight of the moment settled in. Years of questions. Years of quiet grief. All leading to this hidden room beneath an empty farmhouse. The sirens above now roared close enough to shake dust from a ceiling. Lights flickered. The hum of machines wavered. Soon others would enter. Soon the secret would no longer belong to silence. Aloan looked once more at the wall of photographs. Faces that had waited in darkness for someone to see them again. Tonight they were no longer forgotten. Footsteps thundered on the ladder above. Voices calling. Flashlights cutting through shadow. Rescue. Witness. Beginning. As the first officers reached the chamber, Aloan finally allowed the shaking breath to release. Not relief. Not yet. But something close to ending. Because truth had surfaced. And silence had finally lost. Morning returned slowly to the coastal town. Sunlight touched rooftops. The diner sign flickered off. Waves moved in their endless rhythm as if nothing had changed. But everything had. News traveled faster than silence ever could. Hidden tunnels discovered. Years of disappearances connected. An investigation spreading far beyond one quiet town. People gathered in small groups speaking names that had not been spoken for years. Remembering. For the first time forgetting began to break. Aloan stood near the shoreline where the story had quietly begun. Wind moved through the tall grass just as it had that first morning. Yet the air felt different now. Lighter. Honest. The recording device rested safely in official hands. The truth inside it already changing lives. Some answers would still take time. Some wounds would never fully close. But the silence was over. And that mattered more than certainty. Aloan watched the horizon where ocean met sky in a line too distant to touch. The diary's missing final page had tried to hide the truth. Instead, it had guided someone straight toward it. Because stories do not end when words disappear. They wait. For courage. For memory. For the moment someone refuses to stop looking. The waves continued their slow, endless motion. And for the first time in many years, The town breathed without secrets buried beneath the dawn. Morning did not feel the same after truth had risen from beneath the quiet earth. Light still touched the rooftops. The diner still opened its doors. Coffee still steamed in ordinary cups held by ordinary hands. Yet something invisible had shifted inside the town. People walked a little slower. Voices carried a softer weight. Eyes met each other with questions that no longer stayed hidden. For years the town had lived beside an absence it refused to name. Now that absence had shape. Now it had history. Now it had truth. And truth changes the air even when nothing else appears different. Alohan felt that change with every step along the shoreline road. The ocean moved as it always had. Patient. Endless. Unconcerned with human silence or human secrets. But inside Alohan, the long tension that had lived quietly for years was beginning to loosen. Not disappearing completely. Some wounds never vanish. Some memories never fade. Yet the weight was no longer carried alone. Voices across the town were speaking names once buried. Families once left in unanswered darkness were finally hearing something real. Pain still existed. Grief still remained. But uncertainty was slowly giving way to understanding. And understanding brings a different kind of quiet. Not the quiet of fear. The quiet of truth finally allowed to breathe. Days passed with a strange mixture of heaviness and light. Investigators moved through places once ignored. Old records reopened. Forgotten evidence examined beneath new eyes. The hidden tunnels beneath the farmhouse stretched farther than anyone expected. Rooms sealed for years. Equipment designed for watching without being seen. Each discovery confirmed what the missing diary page had tried to protect. Someone had believed secrecy would last forever. Someone had trusted silence more than time. But silence is fragile when even one person refuses to accept it. Alohan did not feel like a hero. The town sometimes used that word in quiet conversations that stopped when Alohan walked past. Hero sounded too simple. Too clean. Too far from the complicated truth of fear and doubt that had filled every step of the journey. What Alohan felt instead was something gentler. Responsibility. Because finding truth is not the same as healing from it. Healing takes longer. Healing asks for patience that cannot be rushed. So Alohan returned to small routines slowly. The public records office opened each morning with the same soft creak of the door. Dust still drifted through narrow sunlight. Paper still carried the fragile stories of ordinary lives. Yet the work felt different now. Every document mattered more. Every forgotten name felt heavier. Every quiet detail seemed capable of holding unseen meaning. Alohan handled each page with deeper care. Because one missing page had changed everything. Sometimes visitors arrived not for records but for conversation. People who had never spoken before now carried memories they wanted witnessed. Short stories. Half-remembered moments. Feelings they once believed unimportant. Alohan listened to all of them. Not searching for mystery anymore. Simply allowing truth to exist where silence once lived. Listening became its own kind of healing. Evenings often led Alohan back to the shoreline. The same place where the diary had first been opened beneath a restless sky. The same place where memory and present had quietly touched. Waves continued their endless rhythm. In that sound Alohan sometimes imagined voices carried from the past. Not trapped. Not lost. Only waiting to be heard. One evening the sky burned with deep orange fading slowly into blue. The town lights flickered on behind the trees. Soft. Peaceful. Unaware of how close darkness had once lived beneath it. Alohan brought the diary along for the first time since the night of discovery. Its worn cover still held warmth from hands that had written with urgency and hope. Inside the pages the unfinished ending remained. Blank space where final truth had once existed. Investigators had searched for the missing page. Perhaps one day it would be found. Perhaps not. But the absence no longer felt like failure. Because the truth hidden on that page had reached the world anyway. Sometimes stories find another path when words are taken away. Alohan sat on the cool sand holding the diary open to the empty place. Wind moved gently across the paper. Not turning the page. Only touching it like a quiet reminder. For a long time nothing else moved. Then slowly Aloan spoke into the open air. Not loudly. Not for anyone nearby. Just enough for the waves to carry the sound. It is known now. The words felt simple. Yet they carried years of waiting inside them. No answer came back. No sign. No sudden feeling of completion. Closure rarely arrives as a single moment. Instead it grows quietly. Day by day. Breath by breath. Still something inside Aloan settled a little deeper into peace. Night continued to fall. Stars appeared one by one above the dark water. Steady lights that had watched every secret long before anyone noticed. Aloan closed the diary gently. Not as an ending. As a promise. Because truth does not belong only to the past. It asks to be protected in the future too. Standing again on the silent shore, Aloan looked toward the distant horizon where ocean met sky. That line had once felt unreachable. Now it felt open. Wide enough to hold memory without fear. Behind Aloan, the town rested in a calmer sleep than it had known in years. No hidden machines humming beneath abandoned floors. No unseen watchers studying quiet lives. Only ordinary dreams returning slowly to ordinary people. Healing would continue. Questions would still rise. Some scars would always remain. But silence no longer ruled the story. And that changed everything. Aloan began the walk back toward the soft glow of streetlights. Each step lighter than the ones taken before dawn on the first morning. Each breath easier. Each sound belonging fully to the present instead of the past. Halfway up the path, Aloan paused once more and looked back at the dark moving sea. For a brief moment the world felt perfectly balanced between loss and hope. Then a final thought formed clear and steady. Truth does not shout. It waits. It waits through years of forgetting. Through fear. Through empty pages and closed doors. And when someone finally listens closely enough, truth rises. Quiet. Unstoppable. Like morning after the longest night. Aloan turned toward home carrying nothing now except memory and the calm that follows courage. Behind that simple walk rested a story the town would tell for generations. Not about darkness alone, but about the moment silence ended because one person chose to keep looking. The waves continued their endless motion under the watching stars. And somewhere beyond sight a new dawn was already beginning to form.